Part 36. Fantasy. After thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 358. He glanced around and found at least 3 quasi-immortal emperors sitting in the hall. Qin Hao looked at their strength and immediately walked out, fearing that something would happen to him. Without attracting anyone's attention, Qin Hao had already slipped out of the gap. Suan Wu watched Qin Hao come out and immediately levitated his body, always ready to respond to Qin Hao. When he watched Qin Hao gesture to him, he realized that Qin Hao had successfully come out of it, which made him feel relieved quietly. How about it? What kind of strength does the branch hall inside have? Can we wipe them out in one fell swoop? Suan Wu asked Qin Hao softly. Qin Hao glanced at Suan Wu and waved his hand directly to Suan Wu. I also want to eat them all in one pot, but it's a pity that we don't have that kind of strength. As soon as Qin Hao's voice fell, he discovered that a black shadow swept over the sea level, causing them both to look at the sea surface at the same time. They saw Emperor Taixuan coming over with a group of immortal kings. Suan Wu was a little impressed by the momentum. He had lived in the Black Sea for a long time and had never seen such a luxurious lineup. As soon as Emperor Taixuan walked up to Qin Hao, he immediately sensed the location of the branch hall of the ancient palace. How about it? Should we attack them now? Qin Hao had already investigated in advance, so naturally he did not dare to speak rashly. Emperor Taixuan looked at what Qin Hao had found and frowned. What exactly did you find? We can discuss things when we meet. Qin Hao looked at Emperor Taixuan saying this, and his grip was a little too tight. I found Yuan Zun inside, and there were at least 3 strong men with quasi-immortal emperor strength inside. Emperor Taixuan watched Qin Hao turn his head and put it on Suan Wu. They can barely be counted as 3 quasi-immortal emperors here. But Qin Hao has already said, Asahi, Yuan Zun is inside, and of course they dare not act rashly. Got it? I don't believe that there is only such a little power around Yuan Zun. They definitely hide their strength. With that said, Emperor Taixuan sat next to the beach. Since the dark ancient palace is hidden in his own space, Qin Hao doesn't need to worry about anything at all, and naturally there is no need to hide his figure. What to do? I'm thinking about how to deal with this matter. Emperor Taixuan thought for a long time, but still couldn't come up with the result. Suan Wu stood aside and looked at the two of them, and said with a sullen smile, you are not their opponent, the best way for us now is to wait. Since Yuan Zun was escorted here by them, the purpose is to attract them to take the bait, and all their strength will be put inside. Qin Hao kept thinking about some things in his head, which made him immediately set his sights on Emperor Taixuan's body. I have an idea. We can destroy their other branches first. I don't believe they only have one branch here, otherwise they wouldn't be able to hide so many people. Suan Wu heard Qin Hao say this and immediately nodded to Qin Hao. I once found a branch hall at the junction of Xianlei Island and our Black Sea. I don't know if it is still there now. Emperor Taixuan saw that everyone was ready, and immediately nodded to them. Let's go over there now. Fantasy. After thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 359. Call out, call out. Golden figures came to the edge of the Black Sea one after another. Suan Wu stood in front of them and led the way, wanting to lead them to the branch of the ancient palace. I saw Suan Wu slowly walking to the edge of the Black Sea, and immediately found the location of the branch hall, so he slapped it hard. Boom, a loud noise was heard, and Qin Hao immediately discovered that the door to the branch hall had been blown open. Emperor Taixuan saw that the door had been opened, and he had no intention of exploring inside, so he rushed inside with the immortal king. Suan Wu saw that Emperor Taixuan had rushed inside, with a slightly helpless look in his eyes, and quietly sat in the black water. Qin Hao slowly walked up to Suan Wu. Everyone has someone they need to protect, and we never blame you. Suan Wu felt relieved when Qin Hao said this. Just as Emperor Taixuan walked inside, some disciples rushed out from the dark ancient palace. Haha, they actually don't even have a quasi-immortal emperor. This time they are in our hands. As soon as he finished speaking, Emperor Taixuan started killing people inside. Originally, Emperor Taixuan had always been a gentle person, but when he saw that the immortal realm had been completely destroyed, he felt as if he had been severely scratched in his heart. Put the same. Why are you attacking us? Don't you know this is the Dark Ancient Palace? Some people from the Dark Ancient Palace came over and focused on Emperor Taixuan. Qin Hao looked at him and said this. The Xuxian killing formation had been beaten out and they were directly wrapped in the Xuxian killing formation. If you don't say it's better, Hila will be damned. After saying that, Qin Hao directly activated the killing array. Immediately, a burst of blades flew in the Xuxian killing array, cutting the face into a mass of blood mist, and it was impossible to see clearly what they looked like. Qin Hao looked at many immortal kings were seeking revenge inside, knowing that the demons in their hearts had been released. Their immortal realm was originally a cultivation place, so Qin Hao naturally could not let them all fall into the devil's path. Qin Hao glanced at them, laughing. He said killing them is also a kind of training for you. Don't let your inner demons control you. Emperor Taixuan watched Qin Hao keep shouting, and when he turned around, he realized that some of the immortal kings were already red-eyed. Once they truly enter the devil's path, it may be a bit troublesome to bring them back. With Qin Hao and Emperor Taixuan leading the team, the branches of the Dark Ancient Palace were simply not enough to kill, and they all fell to the ground. We have already destroyed their branch temple, and we don't know what they will think. Qin Hao looked at Emperor Taixuan and laughed. 000. Emperor Taixuan looked at the crack in front of him, with a trace of confusion in his eyes. Don't you think we went too smoothly this time? There was no way they would not even let go of a strong person who was a quasi-immortal emperor. After saying that, Emperor Taixuan slowly walked into the main hall of the branch hall. Qin Hao watched Emperor Taixuan groping around inside, and had no desire to follow him. After all, he had always thought that Emperor Taixuan was a little too nervous. Suddenly, Emperor Taixuan punched the hall hard, punching a hole in the back wall of the hall, revealing another passage. There is indeed a secret passage inside, and their powerful people have already escaped. With that said, Emperor Taixuan got into the passage. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 360. Let me take a look inside first, and you guys will wait outside for me to come out. Qin Hao set his sights on Emperor Taixuan, hoping that he could lead the team and stand outside to prevent them from being made dumplings inside. Unfortunately, Qin Hao underestimated Emperor Taixuan, and he was not willing to stand at all. Nothing was done outside. When Qin Hao just walked into the secret passage, Emperor Taixuan followed Qin Hao to the passage, and immediately ignored what Qin Hao just ordered. Hao kept walking in the passage. The quasi-immortal emperor's strength was always bursting, and he was always ready to deal with some emergencies. It seems that the strength of their dark ancient palace is inside, and they should be the people who just came outside, otherwise we would not be able to kill them so smoothly. Qin Hao has already guessed their identities, so he naturally knows where they are inside. Yuanzun is in another branch of the dark ancient palace, and the resistance in this one is definitely not that strong. I saw that Qin Hao did not leave in the passage. Not far away, he saw a bright light at the end, which made him walk directly inside. When he walked to the bright light, Qin Hao realized that the bright light was not an exit at all. At this time, Qin Hao had two forks in the road, two roads. Different directions were presented, allowing Qin Hao to make a decision. I'll take one path first, and then I'll take the other one later. With that said, Qin Hao walked directly towards the left passage. Since the two passages were the same in all aspects, he naturally couldn't tell whether it was the correct exit. Before he had gone far, Qin Hao he heard the sound of waves inside, and Qin Hao walked directly inside. Qin Hao used all his strength to reach the exit, and found that there was a dark river in front of him, so Qin Hao stretched out his hand and placed it in the river in front of him. Water in the Black Sea? How did they divert the water from the Black Sea? How strange! As he said that, Qin Hao turned his gaze in front of him. The Black Sea itself is a very strange river, which can directly absorb all the light, making it impossible for people to see what is underneath. Now that Qin Hao has come inside, of course, he had no other ideas, so he jumped directly into the river. The sound of entering the water sounded. Qin Hao's vision had been affected to a certain extent, making it impossible for him to see the surrounding environment. Fortunately, Qin Hao can unfold his consciousness and let his consciousness see what is happening around him. The Black Sea has always been active, but the water flow in front of him has not changed at all, as if it is a pool of stagnant water, leaving Qin Hao unable to do anything. He knew what the use was. His consciousness wandered around in the water, but he didn't find anything in it at all. The dark ancient palace doesn't do anything strange. They brought the Black Sea inside. I guess the Black Sea has some role. Qin Hao has already guessed it. But Qin Hao didn't think of the key to the problem for a long time, and let 0.8 slowly get out of it. Although Qin Hao didn't find the problem inside, he already knew that the Black Sea had been brought to them inside. It was enough to prove that there was something wrong inside. He stepped hard into the water with his feet, and Qin Hao returned directly to the fork in the road. Next is another path, I hope there will be surprises. With that said, Qin Hao left. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 361. Qin Hao squatted down and picked up a handful of soil. He found that the soil contained some water from the Black Sea. Emperor Taixuan actually brought someone here? Why don't you listen to my instructions? With that said, Qin Hao walked directly into the passage. Emperor Taixuan hadn't come out yet. Qin Hao immediately understood that Emperor Taixuan was in trouble. Not long after he stepped into the passage, Qin Hao heard the sound of fighting inside. Standing up for 2 seconds, Qin Hao looked directly inside. Qin Hao glanced at the environment inside and found that the surrounding walls were wet, obviously soaked by the seawater in the Black Sea. Taixuan, please don't run away, you are no match for us. A burst of hearty laughter came, and Qin Hao saw two figures chasing after him. Qin Hao took a closer look and saw that the first person to escape was Emperor Taixuan. At this time, Emperor Taixuan was followed by another person. That man was dressed in black and holding a giant copper-colored hammer in his hand. He seemed to have a very powerful attack power. Qin Hao looked at that man and found that there was another man behind him. Qin Hao suddenly opened his eyes wide. No wonder even Emperor Taixuan wanted to run away. Unexpectedly, they actually invited these two people out. Qin Hao said, his figure already hidden in the dark. There are two strange people in the dark ancient palace. He has the best combination of skills. Generally, the strength of the quasi-immortal emperor is not their opponent at all. And they also have the fatal flaw is that the two of them must not be separated, otherwise their combat effectiveness will be a problem. At this time, Emperor Taixuan had already fled in front of him, and looked back at the two of them. Bronze hammer, you don't want to. If you continue to chase me, is it useful for us to lose both sides? The voice fell, and Tong Chui laughed loudly. There is nothing you can do. I will defeat both of you. You have to remember that there is a shadow behind me. A thin figure stood out from behind Tong Chui, standing directly on top of Tong Chui's head, his mouth full of laughter. Emperor Taixuan looked at the two of them and focused on himself at the same time, feeling angry in his heart. Find a place. Damn it, if I could bring one more powerful person with the strength of a quasi-immortal emperor, you wouldn't be so arrogant. Since Emperor Taixuan had no way to stop the two people in front of him, he could only keep running towards the exit. But now the road in front of Emperor Taixuan has been completely blocked, and he had no way at all. Emperor Taixuan could only be seen. He turned back and looked at the two people in front of 000. He had already taken out the long sword in his hand. Since you won't let me leave here, even if I die here, you will probably lose a layer of skin. With that said, Emperor Taixuan's immortal power has been released. Tong Chui saw that Emperor Taixuan had taken action. Tong Chui immediately put the hammer in front of him, allowing him to directly block Emperor Taixuan's attack. When the copper hammer just blocked Emperor Taixuan's blow, the shadow behind him immediately came out, and the bone knife in his hand was already displayed. Hey, take a stab at me. As he finished speaking, the shadow shot directly at Emperor Taixuan's head. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 362. The bone knife in Shadow's hand showed a cold light and struck directly at Emperor Taixuan. Emperor Taixuan glanced at Shadow and knew that he was no match for Shadow at all. He kept retreating. Unfortunately, inside the cave with the wall already in his possession, Emperor Taixuan had no way to escape smoothly, and was forced back against the wall by the shadow. The shadow saw that Emperor Taixuan had reached the end of his crossbow, and the bone knife in his hand thrust hard at Emperor Taixuan. The copper hammer saw that the shadow had already taken action, and the hammer in his hand kept spinning on his head, as if he was always ready to make up for it. Although Emperor Taixuan has the strength of a quasi-immortal emperor, it is a pity that he alone is no match for two people. Let him close his eyes directly. When everyone thought that a bloody scene was about to happen, a familiar figure suddenly walked out in front of Emperor Taixuan, making everyone focus on Qin Hao. Is this how you view our fairyland? Qin Hao from Immortal Realm asked for advice. The sound was like a loud bell, and it began to be transmitted throughout the entire passage, causing the shadow to quietly return to the copper hammer. Emperor Taixuan looked at Qin Hao appearing in front of him, and said with a smile, haha, I didn't expect that. I still owe him. You have a life, why didn't you come out until now? Qin Hao looked at Emperor Taixuan saying this, and said directly to Emperor Taixuan, stop saying that, let's deal with the problem in front of us first. Since they still have two powerful quasi-immortal emperors in front of them, of course they dare not rely on them. Tong Chui looked at Qin Hao standing in front of him and narrowed his eyes slightly. I didn't expect that the immortal realm actually still has a quasi-immortal emperor. This time we made a mistake. Qin Hao glanced at the copper hammer, and then at the shadow behind the hammer. Whoever you want to deal with, the two of us must choose only one person to deal with. Qin Hao focused his attention on the shadow, as if he wanted to take action against the shadow. Emperor Taixuan glanced sideways at Qin Hao and said, my attack is more powerful, so I'll just attack the copper hammer. Qin Hao saw that Emperor Taixuan had brought people to the side, and directly focused on the shadow. Since the shadow had been hiding behind the copper hammer, not many people had seen his true face in Lushan. Unexpectedly, the shadow actually appeared again. Short and dark, it was hard to think anything about it. Qin Hao slowly walked up to the shadow and said with a smile, I'm sorry, did I interrupt your attack by suddenly showing up just now? Shadow watched Qin Hao walk up to him, and said with a chuckle, it doesn't matter, I prefer the feeling of chasing prey. You stopped me just now and made me feel the joy of fighting. Although Shadow knew that Qin Hao looked harmless, he knew that Qin Hao was half a point stronger than Emperor Taixuan, otherwise Qin Hao would not have dealt with him directly. Suddenly, Emperor Taixuan appeared in front of Qin Hao. They seemed to be studying something inside. We must kill them as soon as possible, otherwise all their transfers will be in vain. Qin Hao heard Emperor Taixuan say this. Qin Hao had already taken out the weapon on his back, and his eyes were also on the shadow in front of him. I don't want to play with you anymore, just suffer death. As soon as the voice fell, Qin Hao had already rushed towards the shadow collecting and recommending. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 363. In the empty passage, the shadow looked at Qin Hao with a playful expression, as if he wanted to see what Qin Hao could do. Qin Hao rushed to the shadow, and the blade in his hand had been knocked out, directly bombarding the shadow. Shadow watched Qin Hao come to him, with the bone knife in his hand already drawn out, and he immediately fought with Qin Hao. The two war blades attacked together, and there was a sound of metal meeting in the passage. Qin Hao saw that the shadow was inferior to him in terms of strength, and sneered, and said, "Aren't you still admitting defeat? You are no match for me." Shadow looked at Qin Hao saying this, gritted his teeth and said, "I am indeed good in strength. I'm not your opponent, but 000 I don't use my strength to hurt people." After the voice fell, the shadow kicked Qin Hao hard on the wrist, and the figure disappeared immediately. Qin Hao watched the shadow disappear out of thin air in front of him, and he immediately understood that the shadow had used his special skill. Since Shadow can be called the most terrifying quasi-immortal emperor, there is something unique about Shadow. I saw that Qin Hao kept looking around, as if he wanted to see what was going on around him. Don't think that just hiding is enough. I was probably much better at playing hide and seek than you, Asahi. As he said that, Qin Hao looked around. Just as Qin Hao was bragging, there was a sound of metal being unsheathed in his ears, and Qin Hao immediately put the blade on his face. The bones in the shadow's hands. The knife passed by Qin Hao, causing some sparks to appear on the blade in Qin Hao's hand. Qin Hao looked at the shadow and focused on himself and said, "Not bad, I didn't expect you to be invisible." The shadow looked at Qin Hao praising him, and his figure immediately disappeared into Qin Hao. Although the shadow understood that Qin Hao had been praising him, he didn't know what Qin Hao was going to do. When the shadow just disappeared, Qin Hao's eyes have all been closed. For Qin Hao, since the shadow has disappeared and he can't see where the shadow is, it is better to use his own consciousness as his own eyes. Emperor Taixuan looked at Qin Hao and the shadow all the time. After struggling, he angrily said, "We must speed up the process. I have seen other quasi-immortal emperors coming." When Qin Hao heard what Emperor Taixuan said, he kept thinking about countermeasures in his head. The shadow itself possessed the art of invisibility, and he had no way to deal with the shadow. Soon, Qin Hao came up with a way. Let him focus on the empty space in front of him. Qin Hao slowly walked a few steps forward and angrily said, "Shadow, do you plan to be a tortoise for the rest of your life?" The shadow heard Qin Hao insulting him all the time, and his figure immediately appeared on Qin Hao's back, causing Qin Hao to hit the blade out immediately. The blades connected again, and the shadow was directly hit by Qin Hao. He took countless steps back. Before the shadow could become invisible again, Qin Hao struck out a formation in his hand, directly trapping the shadow in the formation. Although the shadow could also become invisible in the formation, Qin Hao would not react to it. What is he afraid of? If the shadow can't even break the barrier, he naturally doesn't need to put him in his eyes. The shadow has been caught, and the next step is destruction. As he finished speaking, Qin Hao's expression had already changed. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 364. Call out, throwing knives were flying in the formation. Qin Hao kept his eyes on the formation, as if he wanted to see what the formation did. The shadow kept dodging the flying knives inside, fearing that he would be damaged by the flying knives inside. Shadow raised his head and glanced at Qin Hao, then angrily yelled at Qin Hao, "Despicable, I didn't expect you would only dare to use such skills to hurt people." After the words fell, Shadow punched the man next to him hard. above the barrier. Although Shadow is more experienced in sneak attacks, asking him to deal with formations is probably a bit like asking Zhang to thread the needle. Boom, there were constant blows on it, and Qin Hao couldn't help laughing when he found that the shadow had no way to come out. Tong Chui saw that the shadow had been caught by Qin Hao, and his expression was naturally a little bad. He had never thought that Qin Hao would be like this. "Shadow, you must find a way to come out, otherwise they will kill you." As he spoke, the copper hammer walked towards the formation. Qin Hao watched the copper hammer walk towards him, and he had already raised the sharp blade in his hand, as if he wanted to take action against the copper hammer. Zhu Xian kill the formation determines the killing power based on the number of people. Of course, Tong Chui did not dare to walk into the formation rashly, lest he would be locked in it. Emperor Taixuan looked at Tong Chui standing there and did not dare to make any move. His eyes on he touched Tong Chui and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Now that your companion is gone, are you already afraid?" Everyone knew that Tong Chui and Shadow were together, and knew that Tong Chui and Shadow had such a deep relationship. Tong Chui glanced at the formation in front of him and angrily said, "You dare not lift it, you are a bit weak in victory." Qin Hao looked at Tong Chui saying this, and waved his hands helplessly, as if he didn't take his matter to heart at all. Emperor Taixuan saw that Qin Hao was still playing, and said to Qin Hao, "Okay, let's stop playing and kill them quickly." I saw Emperor Taixuan chasing the copper hammer again with his long sword, as if he wanted to directly stop the hammer. Qin Hao saw that Emperor Taixuan had already taken action, and of course he would not be outdone. Asking for flowers. With a strange seal on his hands, Qin Hao opened the Zuxian killing formation in front of him, and the sky above the formation was already covered with dark clouds. If it weren't for Qin Hao's initiative to activate them, the heavenly punishment inside would never have been successful. Shadow looked at the formation with thunder everywhere, and kept angrily yelling at Qin Hao, "What do you want to do? Don't you know that it's wrong for you to do this?" Boom, a ray of sky hit inside, causing the shadow to slowly hide next to the wall. Since the heavenly punishment in the formation can be controlled, Qin Hao directly controlled the sky thunder to hit the shadow, which made the shadow already have some fear. Qin Hao knew that Shadow was at the end of his rope and he just needed to follow the formal procedures. Shadow watched Qin Hao slowly walk over from outside, his eyes filled with murderous intent, and he slapped Qin Hao hard. When the Shadow's palm just touched Qin Hao's body, he took a few steps back in shock. Unexpectedly, you can actually transform into a phantom and come into the formation. I am defeated. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 365. Boom, thunder struck the formation one after another, and there was no energy left in Shadow's body. He watched helplessly as the thunder struck him. I saw the Shadow put his hands on his head, and roared for a while. No. Before the voice fell, Qin Hao saw that the Shadow had turned into a black shadow. It seemed that he had been struck by the thunder. Directly hit into nothingness. 957 Tong Chui watched the Shadow die in Qin Hao's formation, his eyes completely filled with hatred. I must kill you, and I will never let you go. The hammer in bronze hammer's hand waved vigorously, and hit Qin Hao directly. Qin Hao watched the hammer hit him, and immediately placed the long sword in front of him. Due to the weight of the bronze hammer, it was relatively heavy, and the long sword had no way of blocking the weight of the copper hammer, causing Qin Hao to slowly take a few steps back. The long sword had been bent directly by the copper hammer, so Qin Hao did not dare to hit the hammer rashly. Emperor Taixuan saw that Tong Chui actually had the intention to attack Qin Hao, and immediately came to Tong Chui, waving the blade in his hand. Tong Chui saw Emperor Taixuan bombarding him, and the copper hammer in his hand was simply there was no way to take it back, so he looked at Emperor Taixuan. He saw Tong Chui put the hammer down directly, and hit Emperor Taixuan with a fierce fist. It seemed that Tong Chui actually wanted to fight directly. Emperor Taixuan faced off head-on. Unfortunately, the copper hammer had no weapon. The sword in Emperor Taixuan's hand was not a simple matter. He directly forced the copper hammer back countless steps and made him retreat to the wall. Qin Hao saw that the copper hammer had already pushed him. He put down his weapon and came to Emperor Taixuan's side. Emperor Taixuan looked at Qin Hao and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you still thinking of interrogating him?" Qin Hao listened to Emperor Taixuan's joke and said directly to Emperor Taixuan, "If you don't have such an idea, just kill him. Even if they are left here, I'm afraid Tong Chui must be thinking about revenge in his head and has no idea how to tell them what happened." Qin Hao glanced at Emperor Taixuan and said directly to Emperor Taixuan, "After all, Tong Chui is a strong man who is a quasi-mortal emperor, let's not let him lose face." As the voice fell, Qin Hao and Emperor Taixuan took action at the same time, and the two sword blades were inserted into the vital part of the copper hammer at the same time. Tong Chui glanced at Qin Hao and waved his hands in the air. Unfortunately, the copper hammer was already fatally injured, so he could only sigh and die inside. Emperor Taixuan saw that the copper hammer and the shadow were dead inside, and said with a smile, "Haha, I didn't expect you to come forward and kill them all." Qin Hao knew that Emperor Taixuan was saved by him, so he directly faced looking at Emperor Taixuan. He said, "Let's go inside and take a look. I just found a large amount of Black Sea water next door. The water in the Black Sea is feminine. It seems that they are refining some kind of 3.8 pills in it." As he said that, Emperor Taixuan walked directly inside. Since the copper hammer and the shadow were dead, the other people around were of no use at all. Qin Hao had just spread the news, and they all looked for opportunities to leave. Qin Hao and the others were not given a chance to do anything. Soon, they came to a stove _. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 366. The cave was as dark as ink, but in front of it was a furnace where elixirs were being refined, so the two of them walked directly to the furnace. Emperor Taixuan stretched out his hand and touched the alchemy furnace. He found that there was still some warmth on it. It seems that they have taken away the pills inside, otherwise it would not be so clean inside. With that said, Emperor Taixuan pointed inside. Qin Hao watched Emperor Taixuan say this, and slowly nodded to Emperor Taixuan. Of course we have to take it away, otherwise they will leave the things for us. 02. Suddenly, Emperor Taixuan slowly walked behind the stove, and an exclamation came from his mouth. Qin Hao saw that Emperor Taixuan walked behind the stove, and he also walked next to Emperor Taixuan. At a glance, he saw something on it. A channel. I don't know what is being transported on this, but it can be connected to the other side. With that said, Emperor Taixuan looked at Qin Hao. Qin Hao looked at the passage in front of him and said with a smile, "If I guessed correctly, the pipe in front of me should be the transmission pipe of the Black Sea water. They needed water from the Black Sea to make pills, so they extradited a Black Sea in it. Can you tell what elixir they are refining? I haven't looked into any of this at all." Emperor Taixuan set his sights on Qin Hao. Qin Hao glanced at the boiler in front of him and shook his head helplessly. "There's not even any residue in it. How do you expect me to know what's in it?" I saw Qin Hao slowly walking to the boiler, looking inside the boiler, and there was a way in his head. "Get out of the way," Qin Hao said, with a trace of energy already accumulated in his fist. When Emperor Taixuan saw Qin Hao trying to attack the boiler, he already had some doubts about Qin Hao and didn't know what Qin Hao was going to do. Boom, a fist hit the face hard, splitting the boiler into two sides immediately. Perhaps because the stove was rotten to both sides, the Black Sea water immediately lost control and flowed down from the pipe. Just as the Black Sea water was about to flow out, Qin Hao immediately picked up something from the ruins of the furnace. Emperor Taixuan looked at Qin Hao picking up a fragment inside, and said with some confusion, "What's wrong? Did you find something?" Qin Hao glanced at Emperor Taixuan, and waved his hand directly to Emperor Taixuan. "This should be the residue of the medicine. Let's take the things away first. All the water in the Black Sea will be moved over soon, and of course they don't have the courage to stay." Qin Hao led the way, Emperor Taixuan followed Qin Hao, and the two of them returned to the fork. Qin Hao glanced at the passage on the left and said softly, "They just hid the Black Sea in it, but they don't know what they are refining. Since the copper hammer and the shadow all died in their hands, everyone else already gone, no one told them at all." The two people had just walked out of the secret passage. Qin Hao turned around and punched the wall hard. In an instant, all the walls collapsed, and the road behind was naturally blocked inside. "This branch hall has been defeated by us, the next one is next." With that said, Qin Hao took the people and left. Collecting, recommending. Fantasy, after thousands of years of seclusion, I became a saint. Author, love to eat chicken legs. Chapter 367. Brush, several bodies appeared out of thin air, causing all the soldiers and crab generals to focus on them. They knew that Qin Hao and Emperor Taixuan had already gone to the branch hall, and they were all sitting outside waiting for them to come out. When they saw Qin Hao and Emperor Taixuan coming out, they immediately came to Qin Hao from the water. "Haha, why didn't Suanwu come out to greet us in person? What on earth did he do?" Qin Hao said while focusing on the shrimp soldiers and crab generals. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals looked at Qin Hao and put his eyes on him. He did not dare to say a word for a long time, as if he was worried that he would say the wrong thing. Qin Hao looked like a swarm of soldiers and crabs, and he immediately knew that something was going on outside. "Where is Suanwu? Take me there right now to take a look." With that said, Qin Hao came directly to the side of the shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Emperor Taixuan saw Qin Hao following behind the shrimp soldiers and crab generals, and quickly ran towards Qin Hao. "What's wrong? What happened?" Qin Hao watched Emperor Taixuan come to him and said softly, "Suanwu seems to have fainted. I don't know how credible this matter is. You guys need to take a look at them first. Since the matters in the Dark Ancient Palace have not been settled yet, Qin Hao certainly cannot be taken away by them all." The shrimp soldiers and crab generals took Qin Hao to a deserted island and pointed to the cave inside. "Suanwu is hiding inside. I won't take you there." Qin Hao looked at the shrimp soldiers and crab generals who kept looking at him, and slowly nodded to their shop. "No problem, just leave the matter to me." Qin Hao came to the cave and saw Suanwu inside at a glance. At this time, a light appeared on Suanwu's body, as if all the energy in his body was passing away, which made Qin Hao feel a little anxious. What happened? Why did he suddenly fall into a deep sleep? Qin Hao slowly walked outside and directly summoned the shrimp soldiers and crab generals. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals looked at Qin Hao and focused on him. He didn't know what happened. "How did Suanwu faint? You must tell me the process, otherwise I can use any method to save him." The shrimp soldiers and crab generals understood that what Qin Hao said was true, and pictures immediately appeared in their heads. It turned out that Suanwu had been waiting below for Qin Hao to come out, but he did not expect that the people from the Dark Ancient Palace came over. They lost some things in the Black Sea. Suanwu fainted. Qin Hao watched the shrimp soldiers and crab generals say this, and slowly walked to Suanwu's side. At this time, the aura on Suanwu's body had been fixed, which meant that Suanwu had activated self-protection. Everything is being done by the Angu Palace. They want to force us out of the Black Sea. What exactly do they want to do? Qin Hao really didn't know what the Dark Ancient Palace was going to do, so he directly drove out the shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Since Suanwu was injured because of them, Qin Hao of course wanted to go to the Black Sea to find out. Only seeing Chin Hao slowly coming to the coast, his eyes were always on the coast. I want to go down and take a look, I don't know what is going on down there. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals pointed to the corpses on the sea. You have to be careful, our bodies are no longer able to enter the water without permission, otherwise we will be destroyed by them. Underscore.